All right, I think we can get started. Um, Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for coming to the final installment of the Ann Welsh McNulty Institute's Women Leadership Wednesdays. My name is Elena Rouse. I'm a current junior at Villanova, as well as a member of the Institute's Lauren Ziti Leadership Ambassador Program. For those of you who do not know, the Ann Welsh McNulty Institute is a center focused on advocacy, community building, and education for gender equality and female leadership. The Institute has 4 guiding principles of leadership. That's impact, influence, change agency, and equity. As a current member of the Institute's 2020 Leadership Ambassador Cohort, it is my honor to speak with you all today and to talk with these talented women, Gia, Kaylan, and Kelsey, who were all leadership ambassadors during their time at Villanova. We titled this session, Utilizing Your Young Power, because we want to share not only the possibilities of young leadership, but ways in which young people, especially those of us entering the workforce, can own their ability to lead no matter their position. Please note that we will save some time at the end for questions and answers, and feel free to put your questions in the Q&A section on Zoom as you come up with them, or you can wait until the end. But with that being said, I would like to open up the panel to our speakers. If you all could tell us a little bit about yourself and what your transition from school to career has looked like. Kelsey, if you want to start us off.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Elena, for organizing this. I'm really happy to be here. So just a little bit about me. I'm from the Philly suburbs, just 20 minutes outside of Nova. I majored in finance and real estate and minored in business law. And while at school, I was involved with a few different groups, one of which was the McNulty Institute. So I'm happy to be back. I now live in New York City and I work in finance at Blackstone. And just a little bit on my transition to the working life. So there's been a lot, obviously, and I'm happy to get into all of it later. A big proponent of that is just mentorship. So I'm happy to speak to it. I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Gia, if you want to go next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Gia. I am also a May 2021 graduate from Villanova. I majored in political science, and now I am an analyst at JP Morgan in their New York City office. So I'm in New York City like Kelsey, and I'm in their regulatory affairs group. And yeah.
Kaylan.
Hello, my name is Kaylan. I also graduated in May 2021, so it's nice to see everyone again. I was a Peace and Justice and a French and Francophone studies major at Villanova, and now I actually live in Charlotte, North Carolina as a special education high school teacher, which I have a lot to talk about, more to come later.
Great, thank you guys. So for my first question, I want to know how you guys prioritize your passions through these changing life stages. Like in college, it's a little bit easier, to dedicate time to things you're passionate about, and that may or may not change as you transition to your career. So I'm curious how you intertwine those in your everyday life. Yeah, Gia, if you want to start off this one.
Sure. So I think that it's like a little bit of a shell shock coming out of college because you are around like-minded people most of the time, like in your clubs and extracurriculars and even like your electives. When you get to being a junior or a senior, you're around people who have those same like passions and interests as you all the time. And then you go to work and that isn't the case anymore. So I struggled at first trying to find things to do like out that like reinforce my passions at first. And I don't know like how all jobs work in all like company programs, but my company like has volunteer initiatives that you can be a part of or affinity groups, and you can get into, I know Villanova is really big on service. So there are a lot of service opportunities that you could find possibly through your job. But if that isn't an option, I also downloaded Bumble BFF. So there are a lot of people that like are our age that are coming out of college and moving to new places that are looking for friends and people with interests similar to theirs. So like I'm really into reading, and I've like found other girls that are like interested in that, and I joined a book club. And then yeah, you kind of just have to put yourself out there and explore new avenues that you don't have to do in college.
Was there anything that you did in college that you were able to kind of bring into your professional career, like some passion of yours?
Yeah, so going back to the service piece, I'm a part of a sorority, and so I was able to join a graduate chapter in the New York City area. So I'm still like passionate about volunteering, of course, and able to do initiatives that way.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
If
Kayla.
I could add on to that, Gia, a lot of what you said kind of reflected a lot of my story, which makes me think I was kind of wondering when I first started working, when I fully transitioned to adult life, I was like, I wonder why nobody told me about all these changes before, because I was certainly in shell shock, like you said. Even though I've been in professional environments before, this was my first full-time job. Most everyone I was working with are at least 10 years older than me. So that's a big gap there, and kind of barrier to making close friends at work. And then there are so many things that I cared about so much in college that I still care about. But when I first started working, one, I was exhausted working all the time and adjusting to a new role. The second, I was like, how do I integrate all these different aspects of my life? And I feel like this only has started happening more recently because, well, we've been doing this for several months now. But I finally kind of realized that work doesn't need to be your whole identity. And once I started getting a better work-life balance, I could do more things outside of work. So, I could start volunteering at local nonprofits and things like that, and finding more ways to integrate that, since I have, some freedom as a teacher, teaching certain lessons about certain things. So, but I will say, I mean, it's hard, especially like I downloaded Bumble BFF too. So when you said that resonated with me. So it's definitely an adjustment, but I feel like if you have the right people guiding you, it makes it a lot easier.
And if I could jump in just to close out the question, I think it's really helpful when you like block off specific times to do what you want. I think like setting in those boundaries like for your work-life balance is really important. Just if you like want to go do a workout class, like make sure you block it out and make sure you stick to those boundaries, just so you stay true to yourself and your own values. And I think that's really important. Just as we go on, I think like Gen Zers are pretty good at that, and it's only going to improve with like flexibility in the workplace and etc. Also, I'm so glad that you guys downloaded Bumble BFF, because Bumble is a Blackstone company.
I have to keep that in mind too. I haven't heard of that before, but Bumble BFF, I'm going to remember that. So often we don't see leaders as such until they have, a specific title associated with them. Especially when it comes to young women, we may not be viewed as leaders through that titled lens. So I'm curious how you have combated the bias, the intersection of, age and gender, so that you can be a leader and use your voice without fears of feeling inadequate or underprepared or whatever it may be. Kaylan, if you want to start.
Yeah, I can totally speak to that. As we were all talking about before, switching to working full-time was a really big adjustment. After 4 years at Villanova, even during COVID in our senior year, I felt like I had my friends, I had my activities, I had my academics, and I really knew what I was doing. I feel like everyone's nodding along. I felt very comfortable. I feel like I was doing really well. Even throughout all the stress of applying to jobs, I was at a level where I was personally comfortable. And then all of a sudden I switched, and it was like the complete opposite. And so that was a big transition, especially because I'm a 22-year-old working in a high school where most people are physically larger than me. I have students who are 2 years younger than me. Not the majority aren't that old, but I do have some students who are over 18. And so that has been a big adjustment, because it's one thing to be close to the student's age because they still see me as an adult figure. But the biggest challenge, I would say, has been with coworkers who just, if they know my age or if they see my face, they just don't treat me the same as they treat everyone else. And that was just a big challenge in the beginning, because they're almost like, I haven't called a student multiple times, which is unfortunate. So I was like, I did my time. I don't want to go back to high school. But something I guess I had to learn that took a long time, really, it took several months, is really just no one is ever going to treat you the way you want to be treated unless you act that way. So really just owning my age and owning that I actually do bring something to the table. I was hired for a reason. I might be new, but that doesn't mean I don't offer anything. And that is not something I knew at the beginning, because all of a sudden I became super timid and meek, and that is very unlike me. But I was almost like, yeah, we can do what you say, even when it was wrong, or, I didn't agree. I was like, yes, we can do that. That sounds good. You have more experience than me. And I almost want to say I regret that, but I don't, because I learned from it. But I almost wish I knew sooner, or I wish someone who was actually above me at the school told me that, gave me a reminder that you were hired for a reason. So I would definitely say that to people who are transitioning, to own that.
I know that's something that I definitely took a long time to learn, like being assertive, like especially when you're with people so close to your age. Yeah. So like that's a great insight.
I can add on. So I kind of see it from a couple of different perspectives. And I think like the first perspective, which Kaylan spoke to, is internal. It's kind of like how you see yourself and your comfort zone almost. I think like some people have kind of always been leaders, or like they've always stepped into like a leadership role through like sports or like clubs or something like that. So I think when you come into the workforce, or I guess any big jump in life, you kind of have to take a step back and reconsider like your position in that space, like at that time, and kind of think about like your own definition of leadership, because that can change and that can vary between people, right? And I think there's a second angle to this also from an external side. Kaylan, like you mentioned, like you kind of wish you had someone there to tell you that like your voice is heard, or that you were hired for a reason. I think it's also good to be critical and see if you have support from your colleagues and your team, and kind of like seek out mentors like for guidance there, just because I think having external support can lead to internal support, or vice versa if one is lacking. So I think it's very much dependent on each person, but I think like having both sides of that is really helpful, and kind of like how you should go about that issue, because I think like we all kind of go through it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, just to add to that, I definitely feel like I experienced like a similar thing, like with the imposter syndrome, just questioning like why, like, am I good enough or smart enough to be here? And similar to Kaylan, like I'm on a very senior team. So the only other person that is under 30 is like, she's my supervisor. So there's no one that is like a peer that you can kind of like bounce ideas off of or use as a sounding board. But I think that and another good point that Kelsea and Kaylan raises, like the internal side, you have to kind of use your voice even in those uncomfortable situations. And even, and like you said, Kelsea, like to the mentorship point, like there are a lot of women in leadership positions on my team, and they're like, always when appropriate, like try to say something at a meeting, even if it's like one thing, pose a question or pose an idea. That way your voice is heard, even if it's in a small way. And I think going back to Kaylan's point, like a lot of people at Villanova are very ambitious. Like we're all there for a reason. So, everyone is on the dean's list. Everyone has leadership positions. You get to be a senior and you get your groundings, and then you get in the workforce, and nobody cares about that stuff. Like you're just an analyst or like an entry level person, and your career is like 30 years long. So us thinking like, hey, where are the leadership positions, or where is this? I want to do more for my team. It's definitely a reality check. And so I just think being vocal, and I'm not confrontational really. So like, it was definitely uncomfortable for me sometimes, like having to speak up when I thought, you could have been said better, or I would like to be included on these emails, or I would like extra work. But I think being vocal is key.
And going off of that, that made me think of something that didn't occur to me earlier. I feel like a lot of older people, when you do get mentorship, sometimes they'll kind of like put you in your place. They'll be like, oh, you just started, like, why are you trying so hard? Why are you trying to do all these things? But going back to what Gia said, I think it's important to voice what you want and what you want to do, just because that's the only way you can really get it in the workplace. So I think mentorship is good in some ways, but I also think like you have to stick up for yourself also. So that goes back to the internal piece there.
Mm-hmm. And I know you guys had mentioned that sometimes it was uncomfortable, but did you find that the more you did it, the easier it got, or that the moment you spoke up, you realized like, oh, okay, like I fit this role, like Kaylan had mentioned, like, you know, they choose you for a reason. Like, did you feel that immediately, or was it something that took getting used to?
For me, as the time has progressed, it's gotten infinitely better. Infinitely. Because my other coworkers are seeing, you know, what I can do, but also just the way I'm carrying myself. And honestly, the biggest issue, or not issue, but the biggest kind of situation has been more with my coworkers than the students, who I thought it would be a really big deal that some of them are a few years younger than me. But when I walked in, and I was more comfortable in front of them than the other coworkers. So when I walked in front of them and just acted like a teacher, acted like an authority figure, they treated me no differently than anyone else. Unless I, you know, bring up my age, which I make it a point not to. But so it definitely gets a lot better with experience, at least in my case.
Yeah, that's. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Gia, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I think that I would definitely agree with Kaylan. Like, I do think that it gets easier with time. Like, I've been in my role like 8 months now. And at first, you know, if someone in the team meeting is like asking someone to do something, or I'm like, yeah, I'm not raising my hand. Like, I don't think I can do that, or I'll leave it to someone else. But now I'm happy to volunteer for projects or to speak on like group calls, and just being proactive, because you have to like own your career, or I mean, if you don't, like no one else will. So
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely like a natural thing that happens, I think, just because I know when I got started, I literally had no idea what I was doing. Like, I feel like even now there are still so many times I have no idea what's going on. That kind of goes in tandem with like what we were saying. So I think like as you learn the actual work that you're doing and what you're supposed to be doing, and if it's right or wrong, that kind of comes with leadership. Like you can say your opinions because you know like what it's supposed to be or like what's not supposed to be.
Yeah, learning by experience, I think, is always, you know, the best way to go about things, as they say. There's nothing. So my next question.
I can kick this one off. I have like a really simple answer to this. I think it is kind of exactly what the question implies, just saying yes. I always like tell people whenever like students reach out to me, like I always say like say yes to all the opportunities and just work really, really hard. I know like there's a lot of like you can't always say that, like people are busy, people have like other things to do, but I really encourage like making time for everything you want to do, everything you want to learn, because that's kind of how you just get what you want in life, I think. And then just I think when you're the lowest on the totem pole, that really helps you stand out amongst your peers and kind of emerge as a leader, even though you don't have like a title that goes with leadership, just because when you can show that you are taking on more work or you're saying yes to more opportunities, then you're going to stand out from the rest of the group.
And also, I think a piece that I've had to, or that I've picked up and learned during my time as in my full-time job is that sometimes you kind of have to take the initiative. And so looking like yes could even be, even if it's not like someone saying outright, like, hey, do you want to take on this role? Or like, hey, do you want to take on this project or position? It's more so looking and taking cues. So, oh, like if your manager is overwhelmed, or, oh, I could take that for you if you want me to take a first pass, um, or things like that, I guess. And so even like I ended up saying yes to planning like this analyst and associate breakfast. Like that isn't in my 9 to 5, but it is something that I wanted to do. And when I joined the working group call, they were like, oh, Gia, do you want to join the like analyst and associate working group stream since you were planning this breakfast anyways? And I was like, sure. So it's kind of like a snowball effect. I feel like once you start doing projects and people are like hearing your name and you're willing to raise your hand, that goes a long way.
If I could add on to that, I feel like what I'm going to say is very similar to what you both said, but I guess I'm just thinking about it in a different way. Because I think for me, saying yes to leadership is almost like saying no. And let me explain that. I mean, I think Kelsea mentioned it before, but I mean no in terms of setting boundaries. And this is such a maybe cliche thing to say, but it's really important, I think, when you get to the full professional work life. But if you yourself are not doing well, if you can't take care of yourself, how are you going to take care of other people? Especially me as a teacher, right? How am I going to be teaching young adults how to become an adult if I'm not being an adult by taking care of myself? And that doesn't just mean in my personal life, but especially at work. I felt like I was getting better at boundaries in college. But then when I got to a professional setting, I was like, I do not know how to set boundaries. I don't want to come across as XYZ. And that definitely has some kind of gender stereotypes in that. But it was a big awakening, especially when I did have to start working. And they paired me to work very closely with someone last semester, because we're semester based, who she didn't respect me at all. She belittled me for many months. She treated me very poorly, to the fact that we had all the principals getting involved, trying to, facilitate. And I was really open and trying to make it better. But it got to the point where there was nothing more I can do. And in fact, I wasn't setting boundaries in a way. It wasn't my fault, but I was contributing to the issue. So I had to start advocating for myself and going to the people above me, advocating like, I need to work with someone else. We've tried XYZ. And I feel like that actually helped me become more of a leader at work, because they saw that I'm willing to stand up for myself and what's best for the students by actually kind of saying no. So that's why I was like, my answer sounds opposite of yours, but I think we're saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm. It's that self-advocacy, I think, that you're all touching on, which is so important. And I know that you guys were all leadership ambassadors during your time at Villanova, and a part of that program is creating a leadership statement, which is just kind of like a mantra of sorts of like, the type of leader you want to be or you are. And I'm curious if that has helped you specifically, or if you have like some sort of mantra or belief in yourself that like you repeat, I don't know, that helps you like make these decisions each day to show up in whatever you're doing.
I don't really have like a mantra necessarily, but I kind of have learned, I'm trying to like, in order to grow, I feel like as like a woman or a person and also as a leader, you have to be uncomfortable. And so a lot of the times I would second guess myself, like, okay, like maybe you shouldn't say this, or maybe you shouldn't raise your hand or ask a question or stand up for yourself. And I like push myself to do that now. So just like that, I guess, in a way, like knowing it's uncomfortable to be confrontational or like stand up for yourself or address someone who may be like being disrespectful or dismissive, but afterwards you're proud because that like demonstrates growth.
I totally agree, Gia. And I think the big thing for me is that I feel like in college and even leading up to college, they pushed us to be very future oriented, reach for your goals. What are your goals? What are the steps you're going to take to achieve them? And we had to be very certain of everything we did. Everything had a purpose, okay, especially at Villanova culture. And something I've been learning as an adult is that there is so much uncertainty. I don't know if I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. And I think in the beginning, when I first started working, that was a big concern. I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I love it. I don't know if this is my career. I'm so uncertain. And I guess the more and more I've talked to other working professionals and other adults, I'm realizing that uncertainty is more, I think, of an adult professional trait. And I think that's okay. I mean, who knows at age 22 what they're going to be doing for the rest of their life. So that's definitely something I've had to think about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Elena, when you brought up that question, it made me kind of wish I might have to go back and look for my leadership statement and like put it up on my wall or something, because I don't remember it. But I think my go-to mantra for me, I always kind of ask myself, like, am I living my best life? Or like, I always tell my friends, I'm like, you need to live your best life, right? And I think that kind of helps kind of look at like the present and also the future. I feel like every morning I'm kind of thinking about my day and like how to maximize all of my time in the day, just because I know for me, like, I'm not going to stay in New York probably like for a long time, just because it's so expensive here. Like, Gia, you know, like I
Yes,
can't
I'm not
stay
staying here long.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like every day, every weekend, I'm like, okay, what can I do to like maximize my time in New York? What can I do to maximize my time working at this company? I'm also in a rotational program, so I think a lot about like, how do I make the most of this 1 year, my rotational on this team, and then what can I do for the next year I'm on a different team. That's kind of my perspective there. But with the whole uncertainty thing, I've been thinking about that a lot, just because I don't know where I'm rotating next. So I feel like that is helpful to have, like, you know, like where you're going to go for your job. You know, you can like stay somewhere, right? But I literally have no idea like where I could be going. So I've been thinking about that a lot and trying to deal with it, just because I'm very like type A, like I need to like plan everything out. And so definitely still working on getting comfortable with the whole uncertainty piece of adulting. One thing that's dependable about adulting are my monthly rent payments. That's the only thing.
I got my bill today.
Yes, those
I
bills come
know.
quickly.
They come very quickly.
It's nice to have things we can depend on, I guess.
I will say, Kelsey, we can be like leaning into the uncertainty together, if you caught my Villanova slight reference. And if I will say, I actually do remember my leadership statement, and I will say that I think about it a lot. So, you know, I don't know if it means everything to everyone. I don't know if it's something that sticks with everyone. But for me, for some reason, that moment I came up with something that does stick with me. So that's a great idea. Maybe I should put it on my wall, Kelsey.
I was just curious because I have mine like written on a little index card, but also like me and my roommate like to make little post-its of little different sayings from now and again, which always help from time to time. So I was curious. But what you all are saying about uncertainty is definitely helpful for me as someone who's in the process of trying to navigate the working world, or like on the precipice of doing so, because everyone seems to have the answers, but it's not the case, because like, you know, a career is such a long journey, which is definitely a good reminder. But my next question that I want to pose to you guys is, what is a lesson that took you the longest to learn? Little philosophical.
Well, okay, I'm gonna say the answer that I was like originally gonna say, but then also I want to touch on like what we were just talking about. So first, I was gonna say that you have to live your life for yourself. You can't live it for your parents, for your friends, for like whoever. You do have to live it for yourself at the end of the day. And I'm like battling with that now because I like got accepted into law school last fall and I deferred, and so I'm supposed to be going in the fall, and I don't know if I want to go anymore, but like I've wanted to go my whole life. And my mom and my grandmother, they're just like, how could you not want to go to Duke? Like, that's amazing. And you have to listen to like your inner voice and like, okay, are they going to be the ones studying at, 1 a.m. with me and paying my student loans and having to, work my job? No. So you have to do what is best for you, even if, and this goes back to like what we were saying, like, okay, we've always been pressured to like have our whole lives figured out. And just because you said you wanted to be something when you were like 15 doesn't mean that that is what you have to do now at all. I'm trying to focus on figuring out my next step instead of like the next 10 steps. So I would highly encourage people. I think that even like in interviews, I hate the question when they're like, what do you want to be in 5 or 10 years? And it's like, they probably don't even know what they want to do in 10 years. So of course, like make it a good answer for that. But I don't think that you actually need to know that. It's just, it's okay to just be figuring it out.
Mm-hmm. And it's not always easy to listen to that inner voice too. Yeah, Kelsey?
Going off of that, Gia, I think the longest lesson, I'm still working on this lesson, I think, that the lesson that took me the longest to learn is I think you need to focus on yourself and what you really want to do. I think my whole life, like I've spent so much time and effort just thinking about like how to get to a certain place and how to look a certain way, to like college applications, job applications. I feel like I've spent so much time like building my resume, even like in high school and in college. And then recently I kind of realized like this shouldn't be a priority. I think the priority has to be like finding a balance between all the things you want to do and accomplish in life. Like I want to travel, but then if I'm working like a really tough job in finance, like how is that going to work out, right? So I'm still working on that. I also recognize that I think like that perspective has gotten me this far also. So I think you kind of have to go through like wrong lessons to reach a place and reflect and say like, okay, like that wasn't right. I want to live a different way moving forward. So there's kind of two things there.
I guess for me, 3 things come to mind, all things that myself and everyone has already touched on. But one, I've said it before, but really setting boundaries for yourself. They're just so important. When you're working full time, when I first started working, I was working from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day. And I was getting paid to work from 6:45 a.m. to 2:45 p.m. So I was adding in significantly extra hours. And I feel like that happens to a lot of people. So, once I got over the initial hump, yes, I've made it a really strong point to have a work-life balance, because even though I love my job, that is not my name. That is not my whole identity. 2, I would say be open to change and possibility, because a lot of what you said, Gia, really kind of hit home for me, because all of college, I was totally planning on going to law school. I've studied and taken the LSAT. I knew I was going to, take a year or 2 off. So that's why technically I have a 2-year commitment right now. But I was totally planning when I took this job just to, experience it, see if I liked it, but then go to law school. And now I start doing it. I mean, I've been having, existential crises at age 22 about, I don't know if I want to go back to school. I really do like this job. I like making money. When am I going to study for the LSAT again and do XYZ? Exactly. Everything you're saying. So the third piece that I am still working on is trying to be okay with not knowing. It's okay to not know. And, I'm trying to think about that all the time, because as someone who's very, very type A, like after this, I'm going to go check my to-do list and check this off. Like it's very hard for me not to have a plan or to be uncertain, because I'm like, oh, if I need to study for the LSAT, I need to start studying now and then start figuring out when I'm going to apply. And I just don't have all the answers. And I think that's okay, because that means that I am in a good spot in life. I'm in a privileged spot where I'm debating whether to keep my stable full-time job or to go to law school. So I'm trying to change my perspective, but I'll definitely say I'm not there yet, but I'm hoping to get there soon.
Mm-hmm.
That reminds me, sorry, Elena.
Oh no, go for it, Kelsey.
I was gonna say, that reminds me, I think I saw like a quote on Pinterest or Instagram or something, and it was like, make peace with the people you will not become. And I think like so Kaylan's saying you had always wanted to go to law school, but then now you don't want to. And then like later on when you're 50 or something, I guess like looking back, you want to say like that was okay that you didn't go to law school. So I think that's something that's interesting just because like we are quite young. I don't think hopefully we don't have too many regrets. So I think like that's just an interesting thing that came to mind as we get older, I think, and think about our lives and in reflection.
I love that quote. Make peace with the people you won't become or aren't becoming. What was it? The exact
have not become. I think like another example, I guess, could be we all accepted to go to Nova, but say we got into another school and we have to be okay with never going there.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, and like you all said, it's like not knowing the answers, but like being okay with being at that point in our lives because we are still so young and we're like learning about ourselves every day. At least I know I am. I'm learning something new or my mind is changing, and like even like a few weeks ago me would be making different decisions. Like it's just constantly shifting. So I think that's great advice. So thank you guys. I think now we're going to open it up to a question answer section. So we have some questions in the chat. Let's see. Okay, so one of the questions that was asked is, do you have a mentor who provides feedback or guidance or advice? If anyone wants to jump in.
I can start. So luckily at work, we have like a couple different formal mentor programs. I think I have like a junior mentor, senior mentor, like different levels, and like another like pod where there's a few first year analysts with a couple of mentors also. But I also really encourage finding informal mentors or just people like you seek advice from. I think like wherever you go, you can kind of find either like alumni who are really helpful or just people who are older and have similar situations or they've like been through what you're going through. And I think it's always helpful just to constantly be asking questions. I think people love talking about themselves. Like it's so easy to talk about like your own life, right? So I think like when you ask a question to anybody, you might not get helpful advice, but it's still helpful to hear someone else's perspective who may have gone through it or just like their take on whatever is going on in your own life.
I totally agree with what you were saying about finding your own informal mentor, because I was also assigned a mentor, and don't get me wrong, she was super helpful, but at the same time, I feel like there's just a different connotation to it when you're kind of, I don't want to say forced because maybe she signed up for it, but when it's an obligation versus when it's almost like a friend, because those are harder to find and it comes more naturally, I think. So, maybe you do get lucky and just get assigned a really nice mentor. But I started finding a mentor towards the end of last semester when I was having issues with a coworker. And I realized she was really there for me. And she was the reason, I advocated to her and she took it to the next level because she knew everyone else much better. She has been around for a long time. So now actually I get to work with her. And it's really amazing how helpful one person can be. And it was recently her birthday, and I was telling her, I was like, I don't know if I could have stayed here without you advocating for me to the administration, because otherwise, I'm not sure if they would have taken just my word without someone else's word who saw it as well. So, I mean, mentors are great.
Yeah, similarly to Kelsea, my job does something similar where they put us with a mentor. And the way that my department did it was they give you a mentor that is on a different team, which I liked because she was able to provide me with a perspective that like from the everyday, like the people that I'm interacting with, she has a different background and different interests. And so I think that is a piece of advice that I've learned is like, you can be open to having mentors that may not be doing exactly what you want to do. So at first I would probably have been like, oh, she's not a lawyer. Like what kind of advice can she offer me? But she's the reason that I'm like exploring new potential interests because she has her master's in public policy. And so getting exposure to people who are like in other realms or have different perspectives, I think is really helpful.
I think one more thing to add, I think finding mentors are important, but I also think finding a sponsor is also important. I feel like I've heard podcasts about like sponsors, but I never really knew like what that meant until like it kind of happened to me. My MD, luckily from one of my internships, is really, really great. Like he's put himself like out there just to help me build my own career. And that came through in an informal mentorship. So I think like those informal mentorships can lead to finding a sponsor, which I think is so, so crucial for certain careers. If you want to like get to a certain place.
Yeah, that's great. We have one other question. This is a fun one. Who is someone that inspires you and why? I know this one could go a lot of ways. It could be anyone, someone that inspires you and why.
I can start. Oh, Kaylan.
Oh, sorry. You can go ahead, Kelsey.
This is like reverse, I guess, but I think my brother inspires me. Like he's my younger brother. And I think what's inspirational there is that I am more driven to do more, like accomplish more, just to continue being that role model for him. Like obviously you don't want to be outdone by like your younger siblings. So I feel like there's that competitiveness there too, which really helps. I think that's healthy for like inspiration. Maybe, I don't know, that's toxic of me to say, but that's my perspective. So I think he is probably one of my biggest inspirations, just because I want to continue like being that person to look up to for him.
Yeah. And I don't think that's toxic as someone who has siblings. I think a little healthy competition is good. Kaylan or Gia, did you have someone in mind? Yeah, Kaylan.
So the person I have in mind is just one that I randomly thought of recently. I wouldn't say it's a person who I think of often, but I had this high school teacher in 10th grade, my history teacher, and I would always joke around to my friends and just say like, I want her life. I want to be like her, because she was just so happy. She would just come in every day. I could tell she loved her job, but outside of work, she loved her life. She talked about her family. I follow her on Instagram now, and I mean, you know, how real is Instagram? But she looks very happy.
Yeah.
And I was recently just telling my best friend from high school, and I was saying, do you remember her? It's so funny that now I'm a high school teacher, and I never planned ever to be a teacher. So this is random, but I was like, that's crazy, because I would always think I just want to be like her in the way that when I was in high school, I was like, whenever I'm a working professional in the adult world, I just want to be happy with whatever I'm doing. So I wouldn't say that someone like, you know, Kelsey, your brother, I mean, I could say a lot of my family members or friends at XYZ, but just someone on top of my mind recently. And then from time to time, I just do think about her, and I'm like, I just want to be that content in life.
And that's something special about teachers too. They often don't realize the impact they have on their students. I think that's like a common trait. Gia, did you have any insights? Sorry,
yeah,
Gia.
so someone immediately came to my mind, but it was very cliche, so it sounds cliche, so I don't want to say it. But Michelle Obama is my role model. Just in the pandemic, I read her like memoir, Becoming, and so like from the outside looking in, of course, like she's just always looked like so polished and put together, and like seeing a woman of color like being the first lady, like we were probably like 8 or 9, and so even from back then, like I looked up to her, but after reading her book, she like is very similar. And I've like of course, like Kaylan said, like what does Instagram show? And of course people choose what they want to put in a book, but she just had like a very similar path of like going to law school, but like feeling pressures from like her family, and then she didn't even want to practice law anymore, and just like a lot of the internal like challenges that I feel like I'm going through, like coming out and being like a young adult. She's just very relatable in those ways. And she's also just beautiful, and she knows how to dress. Like she's just like a boss. So I love her.
Yes, totally. That's a great answer. I think that is all we had for questions. I just wanted to thank you all for coming today. I know for me personally, as someone who's about to be entering the working world, and is, soon to be out of college, this conversation has been so helpful, and I'm sure it's going to be helpful for all of those who listen and watch. So truly thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to come and share your thoughts with us. I'm grateful to you all and to the McNulty Institute and their Lorenzini Leadership Ambassador Program as well for giving me this opportunity. I also wanted to mention before we go that Leadership Ambassador Program, the Lorenzini Leadership Ambassador Program, has open applications, and that I'm always open to talking about what the program entails and my experiences for anyone who is interested. But yes, I just wanted to thank you all. This was absolutely wonderful, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their evening.